In the heart of Africa, where life and death move in rhythm, nature tells stories few ever witness. It was a morning bathed in gold, the sun rising over the vast Serengeti. Birds cut across the sky like brushstrokes, painting motion onto silence. Every creature stirred, from the smallest beetle to the proudest predator. But beneath this harmony, destiny prepared something extraordinary. A lioness, fierce and graceful, moved through the tall grass with quiet urgency. In her jaws, she carried her newborn cub, fragile, golden, and trembling with life. Behind her, laughter echoed, not of joy, but of hunger. A pack of hyenas had caught her scent. Their snarls sliced through the morning air. Closing in fast, the lioness ran, her heart pounding like a drum of desperation. She darted toward the forest, a place no lion dared to enter. Branches tore at her fur as she leapt over roots and stones. But fate was cruel. Her paw slipped, and she tumbled down a narrow ravine. The cub rolled from her grasp, vanishing into the shadows. The lioness tried to rise, but her strength was gone. Her final roar echoed through the valley, a cry of love, loss, and surrender. The forest fell silent once more. Only the faint whimper of a lost cub remained, and somewhere in that silence, another heart heard the call, a guardian unlike any the jungle had ever known, a creature of strength, sorrow, and unexpected compassion. This is the story of Kunga, the gorilla who saved a lion's cub, and the moment the wild itself witnessed the impossible. The first light crept through the trees, touching the forest floor in broken rays. Among the ferns, the cub stirred, its small body trembling in confusion. It cried softly, its voice weak, echoing through the morning mist. Each sound was a plea, a whisper of innocence calling for help. But no lion would hear it here, only the forest dwellers. High above, parrots scattered in alarm. Monkeys watched curiously, whispering to each other in quick chirps. Then, from the shadows, a shape moved, massive, deliberate and silent. Kunga, the silverback, stepped into the clearing. His eyes scanned the ground, locking onto the tiny creature below. He grunted softly, unsure what he was seeing. A predator's child? Here, alone? He could have turned away. The law of the wild would allow it. But something stirred within him, a buried ache from the past. He remembered his own lost infant, taken by a leopard months before. Pain flashed across his deep, intelligent eyes. He approached slowly, lowering himself to the ground. The cub flinched, letting out a fragile roar, but Kunga didn't retreat. He extended a massive hand, palm open. The cub sniffed it, confused, cautious, then pressed its head against it. In that moment, predator and protector became one. The wild had bent its rule, compassion had replaced instinct, and the jungle gained a new, unspoken legend. Days passed, and the forest whispered of the strange bond. Kunga carried the cub gently through the undergrowth, keeping it close to his chest. He watched it with quiet awe, how its small claws gripped at his fur. He found leaves to cover it, fruit to feed it. Though it spat most out, still he persisted, learning what this strange child of the savannah needed. At night, the cub would curl against his side, its warmth soft and steady. Kunga would stay awake, watching the stars through the treetops. He had lost his family once, but fate had returned him a purpose. The troop watched from a distance. Uneasy at first, their leader had taken in a predator, a creature that should have been their enemy. But when they saw how gently he guarded it, their fear softened. They began to bring offerings: fruit, leaves, water from the stream. Even the birds grew used to the sight of them together. Sometimes Kunga would lift the cub onto his shoulder and walk through the mist. The cub would look around, wide-eyed, as if discovering a world meant only for him. When thunder rolled, Kunga would cover him with both arms, sheltering him completely. He had become both father and fortress, and though the forest was full of predators, none dared to challenge the silverback. The cub's cries slowly turned into playful growls. Its strength was returning, and so was Kunga's joy. Together, they began to rewrite what it meant to survive, not by power, but by connection. Two souls, one bound by loss, the other by innocence, healing each other. But peace in the wild never lasts. Far beyond the trees, the same hyenas roamed the plains. They had followed faint trails. The scent of the cub lingered in their memory. And now that scent led them back into Kunga's forest. They moved silently at first, testing the air with every step. Their laughter was hushed, replaced by hunger and vengeance. Kunga sensed it before he heard it. The forest grew still, and the birds went silent. He placed the cub high in a hollow of a tree, out of sight. Then he stood tall, a towering figure of muscle and resolve. The first hyena crept from the shadows, baring its teeth. Then another, and another. They circled, snarling, eyes glinting with bloodlust. Kunga beat his chest, the sound rolling like thunder. The hyenas hesitated, just for a heartbeat. Then they lunged. Kunga met them with primal fury. His roar shaking the branches, he seized one by the throat and hurled it into a tree. Another bit into his arm, he crushed it with a single strike. The third turned to flee, but found Kunga already there, eyes blazing, within minutes. The forest floor was empty once more. Kunga stood bleeding but unbroken. He turned to see the cub trembling in the hollow, eyes wide. He smiled softly, reaching up to lift it down. Safe now, his eyes seemed to say. And though they shared no words, both understood. Days turned into weeks, and the forest began to whisper a new name. The Two Kings. Wherever Kunga went, the golden cub followed, tumbling clumsily through vines and roots. Sometimes the gorilla would pause and wait patiently, watching the little lion catch up. The cub's playful growls filled the forest, breaking the silence that once haunted Kunga's heart. Each sunrise, he carried the cub to the high rocks where mist kissed the treetops. Together, they watched the world wake, a ritual that bound them deeper each day. Kunga had never known such peace, nor such responsibility. He would groom the cub gently, untangling burrs from its soft fur. The cub would paw at his massive hands, biting playfully, learning strength from gentleness. The troop watched with awe. Even the youngest gorillas tried to imitate Kunga's care. It was as if the forest itself had accepted the cub as one of its own. Predators that once prowled, the edges now kept their distance. They could sense something sacred in the bond between beast and protector. One afternoon, the cub tried to mimic Kunga's chest beating, tapping itself with tiny paws. The gorilla laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that echoed with warmth. He scooped the cub into his arms, lifting it toward the sunlight filtering through leaves. The light caught the cub's golden fur, and for a moment it looked almost divine. Kunga whispered a soft grunt, a promise of protection, of love unspoken. When storms came, they took shelter beneath the great fig tree. Kunga would curl around the cub, keeping it warm as lightning tore across the sky. In those dark moments, he remembered his lost child, yet found healing in the new one. The cub had given his life meaning again, a second chance to guard what was pure. When the rain stopped, he would emerge, carrying the cub across the glistening jungle floor. Even the earth seemed gentler beneath his feet. At times, he'd find fruits and lay them before the cub. Though he knew lions didn't eat them, it wasn't food. It was affection, a father's gesture of care. The cub, in return, would nuzzle against his chest, purring softly, and every night as stars filled the sky, the forest slept under a strange peace, for predator and guardian had become one heartbeat. As the days passed, the cub grew stronger, its body leaner, its eyes sharper. Kunga began to teach it the ways of the forest, how to listen, how to sense, how to wait. He taught it where danger hid and where safety could be found. Every lesson came not from words, but from rhythm, the rhythm of the jungle's heart. The cub learned how to move silently through the ferns, stepping softly, breathing slow. It learned when to play and when to freeze. When birds suddenly went quiet, it knew to hide close to Kunga's side. When the wind shifted, it learned to raise its nose and read the scents of the air. Kunga, too, learned that guardianship was not about control, but patience. He allowed the cub to fail, to stumble, to try again. Sometimes the cub would chase butterflies, pouncing clumsily, filling the jungle with laughter. Other times, it would growl at its reflection in the river, thinking another cub had entered its world. Kunga would watch, amused, his deep eyes reflecting a peace he hadn't felt in years. Every sunrise, the forest felt more alive, not with fear, but with purpose. Even the other animals began to notice the strange calm. The elephants would trumpet softly as they passed near the fig tree, softly as they passed near the fig tree. The monkeys would toss fruit down in play, teasing the cub. The balance of the jungle seemed restored, as if compassion had rewritten the laws of survival. Kunga's troop began to accept the cub fully, letting it play among their young. They would chase, tumble, and rest together. A family without boundaries, but in the cub's heart, a calling stirred, an ancient instinct buried deep within. Sometimes at dusk, it would stare beyond the trees toward the open plains. The scent of the grasslands, faint yet familiar, would reach its nose. Kunga saw it, but said nothing. He understood destiny's quiet pull. Still, he hoped their peace would last just a little longer. But the jungle was never still for long. Unseen eyes had begun to watch again, the kind that never forgot and never forgave. The hyenas were back, and this time they weren't alone. The sun rose heavy that morning, blood red behind a curtain of storm clouds. The air hung thick with tension. Even the insects were silent. Kunga felt it first, that eerie stillness before chaos. He stood atop the ridge, scanning the undergrowth with cold, cautious eyes. The cub played below, unaware, chasing a beetle through the leaves. A low growl rippled through the wind, distant, yet familiar. Kunga turned sharply, nostrils flaring. The hyenas had returned. their laughter twisted and cruel, but this time there were more, 7 of them, lean, scarred, and hungry. They crept through the ferns, eyes glinting, muscles tense with hunger and vengeance. The forest seemed to shrink around them, the air electric with threat. Kunga placed himself between the cub and the oncoming shadows. He beat his chest once, slow, deliberate, a warning to all who dared approach. The cub sensed danger, crouching low, its eyes wide with fear. A flash of lightning tore across the sky, followed by thunder's roar. The first hyena lunged, jaws snapping like iron. Kunga met it mid-leap, slamming it into the ground with earth-shaking force. 2 more attacked from the sides. Biting at his arms and legs, he roared, a sound so deep it silenced even the rain. The jungle erupted into chaos. Snarls, roars, and crashing thunder, blending as one. Kunga fought like the spirit of the forest itself. Primal and unyielding, he hurled one hyena against a rock, sending echoes through the trees, blood mixed with rain, painting the mud beneath their feet. The cub, trembling behind a log, let out a tiny roar. Defiant, desperate. Kunga heard it, and something inside him ignited. He rose with fury, tearing through the attackers with unstoppable might. Each blow was justice, each roar a vow. When the last hyena fled into the storm, the jungle fell still again. Kunga stood bleeding, his chest heaving. Lightning flashing above him, the cub crawled forward, pressing its head to his arm. He smiled faintly, weary but victorious. The rain had stopped, leaving the forest washed in gold and silence. Kunga sat beneath the fig tree, his wounds healed, but his heart heavy. The cub was no longer small. Strength now rippled beneath its golden fur. Yet its eyes held a restlessness Kunga couldn't ignore. Every night, the cub gazed toward the open plains, drawn by instinct. Kunga understood. The time had come for it to find its destiny. At dawn, he led it to the edge of the jungle, where green met gold. The cub paused, glancing back. Uncertain, Kunga let out a soft grunt. Proud, gentle, final. The cub pressed its head against his chest, then turned toward freedom. As it disappeared into sunlight, Kunga felt both loss and peace. He had protected it long enough to let it live on its own. The forest whispered in the wind, bidding farewell to both protector and son. For love, he realized, was not possession. It was release, and so the gorilla watched destiny unfold in silence. The cub thrived in the savannah's wild embrace. It learned to hunt, to lead, and to command respect. But beneath its fierce roars echoed lessons of mercy and patience. When others fought, it waited. When others killed, it spared. Its pride grew strong under its calm, fearless rule. Even hyenas kept their distance, haunted by an old memory. Every storm reminded the lion of Kunga's protective arms. Every dawn, it looked toward the jungle, remembering the fig tree. One night, it climbed a hill and roared toward the horizon. The sound carried far, across rivers, valleys and trees, and deep within the forest. Thunder rolled back in answer. The bond had not died. It had only changed form. The cub had become king, but never forgot the gorilla's love. Strength ruled the savannah, but compassion ruled its heart, and that made it more than a lion. It made it a legend. Years passed, But their story only grew louder. Animals spoke of a lion king and a gorilla guardian, bound by fate. They called them the two kings, protectors of peace between jungle and plain. The fig tree became sacred. No creature dared harm it. Kunga aged gracefully, still watching the horizon for golden light. The jungle thrived under his calm strength, and far away, the lion ruled with fairness and courage. Neither saw the other again, but both lived with the same heartbeat. Their spirits, though apart, remained forever connected. When storms came, thunder and roar blended like old friends meeting again. Elders said their bond had changed the laws of the wild. For the first time, love had become stronger than fear. The forest and savanna no longer stood as rivals, because once a gorilla chose kindness, and it changed everything. Their legend lived on, whispered in every corner of the wild. When Kunga's final day came, the forest fell silent, birds stopped singing, and wind moved gently through the trees. Far away, the lion lifted his head, sensing a loss he couldn't name. He roared once, deep, mournful, eternal, and from the jungle, thunder answered softly. One last heartbeat. The sound carried across lands, blending sky and soil, past and present. The lion stood beneath the open heavens, eyes closed, remembering. He knew the spirit of his protector would never truly fade. Rain began to fall, cleansing, peaceful. Nature's farewell. Kunga became one with the forest he had guarded so long. And the lion, now older, roared again, this time in gratitude. Their bond became legend, their love a symbol of unity. Even after life, they guarded the balance they created. The gorilla and the lion, two souls, one legacy. A story proving that true power lies not in might, but in love. True strength is not about dominance. It's about compassion. Kunga's love turned a cub into a king, and fear into peace. Even across worlds, kindness binds souls forever. In nature and in life, love remains the strongest force of all.